From fitness routines to mental resilience, navigating personal goals to tackling burnout, we all need a little help with the tricky work of being human. Well, that is where the Life Kit podcast from NPR comes in. If you're looking to move with more intention or just need some thoughtful guidance on living better, Life Kit delivers strategies to help you make meaningful, sustainable change. This is much more than just a show that gives you practical advice. It gives you the support and the thinking you need to navigate some of life's trickiest decisions. For instance, we're headed into the fall. Those of us with kids or those of us in school are going back to school. This can be a pretty tricky time. Well, Life Kit has a number of episodes on how to support your kids, from setting up routines to dealing with smartphones to just trying to emotionally connect with them as they go through the tricky stuff that is being a kid and a teenager. And look, I listened to all these episodes. None of them provide a one-stop miracle cure to all of life's problems. That's not how life works. But when I listen to Life Kit, I feel more informed, more assured in my decisions, a little closer to having some of the tricky things figured out. As a parent, that's basically all I could ask for. That's not to say there aren't some episodes that are really helpful at a practical level. For instance, there's a great recent episode with tips for planning a vacation, and that one was quite useful. I think I saved myself a decent chunk of change after listening to it. So if you need help tackling common issues like relationships, finance, parenting, your career, and something that gives you a game plan that you can implement right away, listen now to the Life Kit podcast from NPR.
This show is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Hello and welcome to This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avergan. This day, September 10th, 1847, the execution of St. Patrick's Battalion. St. Patrick's Battalion was a group of Irish-American immigrants fighting in the Mexican-American War, and they are sometimes known as the San Patricios. And they have this Spanish name because, well, they were fighting on the side of Mexico. So yes, take a moment to try and follow that, get your head around it. Irish immigrants come to the U.S., the U.S. goes to war with Mexico, and many of those immigrants look at the contours of the battle and say, hey, you know what? We're going to fight with those guys against the United States. It is a really fascinating story of immigration, religion, shifting allegiances, and ultimately, the moment we're marking right now, this mass execution. Depending on how you count, when these fighters were executed by the U.S. government, it is kind of considered the largest mass execution in U.S. history. So, here to discuss Mexico's Irish heroes are, as always, Nicole Hammer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
Are you ready to do a mix of Irish and Spanish and Southern American accent?
Oh, I've been working on it.
Yeah,
I think I've got it nailed.
It's going to sound terrible.
It's going to be offensive to at least people on three different continents.
If you offend multiple parties, then it doesn't actually, they cancel each other.
They cancel
how it works.
Yeah.
That's what cancel culture is.
3 or more cancels it out.
Exactly. Obviously, the different political contours and the weird allegiances and weird is part of this story. But let's put it in this larger context. I think is very important. As I mentioned, lots of Irish coming to the United States. We know that, but Niki, you want to kind of lay out how these Irish come to this country, and then we'll talk about why they end up in Mexico and why they end up fighting for Mexico.
This is the classic immigrant story that I think most Americans probably learned in school, right? In the 1840s, there is a major famine in Ireland. There's a blight on the potato crop. There's no food assistance from the British Empire. And so all of these people in Ireland begin to leave because they're dying in Ireland. And so you get this mass influx of Irish immigrants to the United States. And they really are the backbone of immigration to the U.S. So it's between 1820 and 1860 make up over a third of all immigrants to the United States.
Wow.
And when they get to the United States, I mean, they take jobs in urban machines and cities to the extent that those are up and running. But one of the main avenues to sort of setting themselves up in this new country is to join the military. And that's what they do. In fact, the U.S. military in the mid-19th century is like 40% immigrant. And there's some real tensions. So in the 19th century, anti-Catholicism in the United States is nuts. It's so bad. And the Irish, as Catholic immigrants, bear the brunt of a lot of this. And in the military, it is institutionalized in a particular way because you have all of these immigrants who are kind of the grunts of the army, and then most of the officer corps are Protestants. And so all of that religious animosity and that anti-Catholicism plays out within the military as well. So you do have all of these Irish immigrants in the U.S. military, but they are, I would not say, entirely happy with their experience.
Right. I just want to highlight, we've talked about it a bit on this show, but, I feel like one of the big lessons on this show is that when you talk about anything in the sort of mid to late 20th century, anti-communism just like intersects and touches everything. And I feel like it's impossible to overstate how much anti-Catholicism touches almost everything from like, whatever, the mid 19th century to the mid 20th century. And so it's like any story I feel like we touch on, you have to kind of run it through the lens of deep anti-Catholic sentiment in this country.
It was a major reason, I know we've talked about this before, but a major reason for growth in the Ku Klux Klan was anti-Catholicism. Yeah. And I think people also forget that the Irish were despised when they came over. I mean, they were seen pretty much as black people. Like when it comes to the bottom of the socio-racial ladder, the Irish people were despised in such ways that their experiences are very similar, and not akin to slavery, but very similar to free blacks and what they are experiencing in the North, which was like chronic unemployment or underemployment, lots of discrimination. And so they had to try to find places that would give them acceptance. And the military was one of those spaces, but it's still, even that is fraught.
I mean, in many ways, it is kind of this also the story of African Americans in the U.S. military is that you enter this segregated, rigid, hierarchical institution, but it is still a pathway to better opportunities at citizenship and economic advancement.
And a stable paycheck.
And then, of course, so we have a bunch of Irish immigrants. We have anti-Catholic sentiment sort of running through their experience, whether it's in the military or out. And then, of course, the other big element here is we have a war that breaks out. So May of 1846, the Mexican-American War begins. What kicks it off?
I mean, this is one of the wars that I feel like was so unnecessary, like in terms of how you think about U.S. domination. So Texas becomes a part of the United States. It becomes a state in 1845. And that is not enough for someone like President Polk, who really wants to take on California. He wants to take on more territory that still belongs to Mexico. And so he kind of engineers this war by bringing in troops into disputed territory, which he knows that Mexico will respond when U.S. troops show up in their country. And it really sparks a battle, which leads to a war, which allows Polk sort of the motivation or the rationale he needs to go and send more troops. We should say this is a war that a lot of people did not support. I mean, Lincoln is against it. Ulysses S. Grant is against it. It just feels like a land grab. It also feels like a way to sort of expand American slavery, because all of these territories would likely become slave states. It's sort of the goal. And it becomes a major problem. It's a short war. It's a quick war, but it's a war that is intended to take on more territory of Mexico.
Yeah, it's a total land grab. And the pretense for war is so thin. Like, they come up with something, but nobody really buys it. And everybody can see through the pretense. But once the war started, jingoism rises up and you get support that way. And there were plenty of Americans who were looking at that land saying, well, we would like that. And so, if he wins the war and gets all of the land, that's going to redound in his favor.
Yeah. As you said, Lincoln is opposed to this, and he says, he's a congressman at this point, but he says from beginning to end, this is based on the sheerest deception. And it is an interesting thing. I mean, it's only 15 years, 20 years before the Civil War breaks out, but you do see some of those same contours. Obviously, the slavery question, but even just the same players and the same kind of sides are developing here. You sort of can think of it a little bit as a proxy for some of the battle lines that will develop a little later on. Okay, so the U.S. sort of provokes this war with Mexico, and it, pulls itself into war. And moreover, there's, I think, a couple specific incidents that lead us to this dynamic that we're discussing today, which is a bunch of newly enlisted Irish immigrants saying, wait a minute, I think I see my allegiance with the Mexicans instead. And so, for instance, there's an incident in the spring of 1846 where U.S. soldiers and the Texas Rangers relatively, I think unprovoked, set fire to a Mexican village, El Fronton. And, so many of the Irish are watching this and they're reminded of the way that the British treated Irish citizens in Irish land, this kind of unprovoked tragedy. And they just kind of like, it's sort of, I don't know exactly how to put it, but it sort of like just brings up a lot of the feelings that they've brought them with them.
Yeah,
including
triggering.
The fact that, yeah, it's triggering, exactly, including the fact that a Catholic church is burned. And so that is, I think, where, we mentioned the Catholic Protestant lines. That's where a lot of this comes into play because, largely speaking, the Mexican side is Catholic aligned. And so their religious allegiances kick in. And so we end up with this dynamic where a good number of Irish immigrants, including this man by the name of John Riley, kind of look to this battle and say, well, I feel like I side with the Mexicans more.
And it's not even a stretch, right? If you're overlaying the geopolitics of Britain and Ireland and the politics of the U.S. and Mexico in this period, like one is an imperial superpower and the other is a place that's being invaded, trampled, treated as less than. And so for the Irish who have fled from the British Empire and British imperial rule, now they're in this situation where there's an underdog and it's not the United States. And so I think it's something where they definitely were encouraged to leave and to join up the Mexican cause. But I would say it's, in some cases, pushing on an open door.
Yeah.
And there are people who came to this country, sometimes just years before. I mean, it brings up all this question of sort of allegiance, but there's no sort of like deep inherent allegiance to the United States. They're sort of finding a new home. They're figuring this out. The U.S. is kind of what is the U.S. is sort of open and contested at the moment as well. So it's no surprise. We should put it, though, in the larger context of it's worth noting that there were a ton of deserters from the U.S. Army, not just the Irish. I mean, there were 40,000 people, say, in this war. More than 5,000 would defect, including about 1,000 Irishmen. But, there were a lot of people questioning the purpose of this war who were part of the U.S. military at the time.
Yeah, and I think it makes a lot of sense that, during this time when people realize what they're fighting for, and if it doesn't feel valid enough for them, then that desire to sort of like, you know what, I can just take off. It's kind of, it's a reality that a lot of people chose in the face of war, and it's certainly a war that they didn't agree with.
Yeah, desertion is so tempting. It's pretty easy, and that's why it's so harshly punished.
Yeah.
Right? That's why they brand deserters with the letter D on their face or on their hand, or they execute them because they need a show of force in order to try to keep people in these military endeavors. It happens with the Civil War as well.
Communication is critical to your success in your personal and professional life. I'm Matt Abrahams, and I teach strategic communication at Stanford Graduate School of Business, and I host Think Fast, Talk Smart, the podcast. I sit down with experts to discuss actionable advice that you can immediately apply to your life. We cover topics like managing communication anxiety, speaking better in the moment, maximizing your influence, and how to negotiate to get what you want and need. Listen wherever you get your podcasts to level up your communication.
Well, folks, it happened. It's here. Fall is in full swing, and it is the perfect time to refresh your wardrobe with pieces that feel as good as they look. Luckily, Quince makes it easy to look polished, stay warm, and save big without compromising on quality. I am turning to quince for all my fall staples that actually last. You've heard me talk about quince on this show. You've heard me talk a lot about linen. Linen time, though, is over. It is now time for wool, denim, and even, dare I say, cashmere. Look, I never thought cashmere would be part of my life, but with quince, there are actually pieces like cashmere sweaters and scarves and hoodies that are really nice and affordable. A 100% Mongolian cashmere sweater from $50. There's washable silk tops and skirts, perfectly tailored denim, all at prices that continue to blow me away. So keep it classic and cozy this fall with long-lasting staples from Quince. Go to quince.com/thisday for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/thisday to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/thisday. Okay, so the San Patricios, this brigade, we're talking about a brigade of about 48 Irishmen who had decided to fight on behalf of Mexico. In 1846, they are led by this man named John Riley, who was born in Galway some point in 1917. He becomes a sergeant in the U.S. Army before he then moves to Canada and then eventually makes his way down to the U.S., enlists in the U.S. Army, and then ends up being the leader of this company of Irishmen fighting on behalf of Mexico. And throughout 1846, they fight a number of battles. They're sort of going through the rough terrain and really tough conditions in what is now northern Mexico and southern California. They have their own makeshift flag. It's an emerald silk that bore the Mexican coat of arms with a golden harp and shamrocks and the motto, Erin Go Bra. It's like if you asked ChatGPT to be like, do a mashup of the Mexican flag and an Irish flag. And it's like,
yeah, except for St. Patrick would have like six fingers and
yes,
like
exactly.
This is that like this.
But it's like, it's just amazing that they're like shamrocks and the Mexican coat of arms on one flag.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I love it too.
And there's one notable battle in September of 1846. They see their first kind of formal action as an individual artillery unit, and they defeat American forces in 3 separate engagements during the Battle of Monterrey. And they're, no surprise, I think, welcomed by the Mexican side and the Mexican troops. And you get all these really interesting translation. So obviously the St. Patrick's Brigade is the San Patricios. John Riley in Mexican Army records is Juan Relay. I love it. I love it.
I love it too.
I also think it's worth noting, like, they're successful at first, so they get lots more deserters. Because people are like, this
and
isn't
press,
just a suicide mission, right? Like, the people are actually, they have a chance to win here. And so it's the San Patricio Brigade, even though it's very Irish identified, is not only Irish people, right? It's escaped slaves and free black people. It's all kinds of people from within the U.S. Army as well. But they just do have this strong Irish namesake.
Love to see a photograph of like what their ranks sort of look like, because you have, Mexican and white and black people speaking different languages, but fighting all for the same cause. I think it would be really cool to see like what that looked like.
And part of this is that Mexico had outlawed slavery at this point, right? And so, yeah.
I mean, Mexico was alluring, I think, for a lot of reasons. If you're a black person, free or otherwise, you are going to Mexico to secure your freedom. But also, if you're Catholic, you're someone who resonates deeply with your religious faith and you want that protected. And so there are a lot of incentives, I think, that Mexico had going for it that people saw as promising.
Yeah. All right, so spring 1846 through summer and into the fall of 1846, the San Patricios are roaming around, having some success. Their ranks are growing. But now we get into the spring and the summer of 1847, and they start to hit up against some tougher times, which leads to this moment that we're marking here where, they're basically captured and mass executed. And all of this is really the fallout of what is known as the Battle of Churubusco. So this is in August of 1847. An estimated 75 to 85 of the San Patricios are captured. They were sort of ordered to protect the retreating Mexican army. So they were kind of put up in the front lines to fight against the Americans. And they basically decide to kind of fight until the very last. Mexicans put up a white flag. San Patricio keeps fighting. And then there's this moment where they are captured, and an American general turns to a Mexican general, San Patricio general, and says, hand over all your ammunition as you surrender. And the San Patricio general says, look, if I had any ammunition, you would not be here, meaning we were going to fight. We're desperate. We were going to fight until the very last moment. But they are captured indeed. And the U.S. Army does not take kindly to them, no surprise. They see them as deserters.
Yeah. And executions, I mean, this is something... I still feel like this is just so barbaric. Like I cannot believe that the executions went on for so long as they did, all throughout the Civil War, as well. That if you were considered a traitor, you would be hung by your neck until you died, and that was sort of it. And they would make this public display of it as a deterrent to tell other people, like, hey, this is what we do to traitors. This is what we do to people who desert. And they make a public, not just a public scene of it, but they let, the corpses hang for days after this massive execution takes place, as a warning to anyone else who would get ideas about what to do. And I still think, though, that sort of barbaric act still generates like a sense of martyrdom for these Irish soldiers who fought so valiantly for Mexico, and they become heroes in their death.
Very much so. And I think that the barbarism is maybe part of that as well, that idea of martyrdom. There is something that seems, I don't know, out of time with how primordial some of these punishments are, right? Obviously the mass executions, but branding people and like leaving the corpses out there, it's something that you think of as something they were doing hundreds of years ago in
medieval
times. Right? But the fact that it was still happening kind of on the eve of modern warfare, which is birthed during the Civil War, you still have this mix of these very old kind of almost torture methods meeting up with what will become modern warfare.
So on the execution, some of the numbers are a little hard to pin down, but it's somewhere between 60, maybe 80 people are executed over the course of a number of days here. And I'd mentioned in the intro that this is sometimes referred to as the largest mass execution in U.S. history. Now, keen listeners to this podcast will know that we did an episode about the Mankato hangings, and this was in December of 1862, where 38 Dakota men, Native American men, were executed on the orders of Abraham Lincoln, in fact. They were all killed at one time. There's photographs of that. It's really just stunning. That is often referred to as the largest execution, so I think it might just be that was a single act, 38 people one time. This, I think, maybe took course over the course of a couple of days, but
and in Mexico, it's not in the United States,
right?
So
right,
yeah, and in fact, and there was something. Just another detail of this is that the San Patricios are hung just as the U.S. flag is being raised over Mexico City, and so it is seen as kind of like this act of conquering in this very kind of cinematic and symbolic way.
Yeah, it does. It feels like a little bit like a movie. Yeah. Something Mel Gibson would be in.
Mel Gibson would absolutely be in this movie.
How's his Spanish accent? You want to put a button on the Mexican-American War? I mean, it eventually wraps up, I'd say about a year later or so, as the tide turns towards the U.S.
Well, the U.S. takes a ton of territory. It gets about 2/5 of what had been Mexico, places that are now California, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, parts of Oklahoma and Kansas and Wyoming, Arizona, Colorado. Like the Southwest becomes part of the United States. The U.S. pays $18 million, which probably not enough for taking that much productive land. And then that is going to be a big part of the story of the U.S. Civil War, which is you've got all this new land and now you have to decide if it's
free state or slave state.
People are free.
Yep.
Yeah. It's so funny. We've talked about it a lot on this show, this sense that in many ways the Civil War never ended. And I think there's pretty strong arguments for that the Mexican-American War in many ways that never ended. I mean, you just thinking about that border as perpetually contested, I think helps you understand a lot of the dynamics that continue to this day.
Yes, and it's a lot of land. I mean, I had to go and look on a map because I just wanted to get a sense of like the geographical space of it all. That was Mexico. And when you think about all of that territory, and 2/5 of what was Mexico, I mean, it's no small thing. All the way up to Wyoming is just sort of crazy to me too.
Yeah.
The other interesting button on this story is the U.S. Army denies the existence of the San Patricio Brigade until 1915. They just act like it never happened, probably because they don't want to glorify the folks who were murdered there or this act of desertion. But there's a congressional inquiry into it, and they're like, okay, guys, this happened. Putting it down on paper.
You know who doesn't deny it? Mexicans or Irish. I mean, it's kind of amazing. But to this day, both countries continue to remember these folks. So every St. Patrick's Day in Mexico, there's parades and bagpipe music. There's a plaque bearing their names. There's a bust of this John Riley, Juan Relay, in the Plaza San Jacinto, which is now in Mexico City. When the Irish president visited Mexico in 2013, he laid a wreath at Riley's bust during a state visit. And then the city of Clifton, Ireland, which is where he was born, they have a statue honoring the San Patricio Brigade, and the city flies the Mexican flag every September 12th to celebrate, to mark this moment. It's kind of amazing.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
I want to see some of those plaques.
I know.
Yeah,
Time for a trip to Mexico City.
But I also want to, I would just want to imagine sort of, you're a tourist in some Irish town and you're walking along, happens to be September 12th, and someone's raising a Mexican flag.
Yeah, I know.
What is going on here?
Some listener, take a picture, send it in.
Yeah.
And some other listener, make us up a San Patricio battle flag. I want to see that harp surrounded by shamrocks.
And don't use AI. Yes.
Correct.
All right. Well, really fascinating story. I'm very glad we got to it. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Radiotopia.